What's up, Creative Christian Pod fam? Happy Friday and welcome to the show. We've got an awesome guest coming up today that I am super excited to introduce y'all to. She's an artist joining us all the way from New York City, or as Alicia Keys so aptly put it, the concrete jungle where dreams are made of. Though when I was a kid, I 1,000% thought those lyrics went concrete jungle where dreams tomato. Thankfully, our guest today has a way better ear for music than 12-year-old Bailey, and her music spans genres from alternative to electronic. And the themes explore her relationship with the Lord and connect with her life experience. Her newest EP called Where I Belong, it hit streaming services in early March. So if you haven't checked it out yet, I'll put the link in the show notes below. But for now, I am thrilled to welcome Ravahn to the show. Ravahn, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Bailey.
I'm excited. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better and giving our audience the opportunity to do the same. So if you want to just dive in and just kind of share, how you found faith, how you got started in the creative arts, and what was the point where those two things really started to intersect in your life?
So I started with music first. So that was in 2013 for me. Awesome. I was studying abroad in Korea at the time, actually. And
cool.
I discovered that I wanted to explore singing. I had done different things that played around with music, like blogging and whatnot, but I wanted to create something from my own ideas. And so that was 2013 for me. So that was before I became a Christian. And the space where I came to faith was in 2018, going into 2019. Mm-hmm. So there's that 6 year or 5-6 years. And that was a huge change. I was living in Long Island City, which is another part of Queens. Mm-hmm. And God saved me in my room. I wasn't part of a church at the time, but that was a pretty rock bottom moment for me. I was working on music. Pride and selfish ambition were my go-tos. And I just felt that everything that I thought I was sufficient enough to figure out, New York, I'm hustling, I'm working a corporate job, I'm going to figure out this music career stuff. And everything was just crumbling. Relationships, friendships, it was just really difficult. And I felt that I had finally reached a point where I did not have an answer for any of it, get myself out of it. So that was where the Lord had met me in that very broken moment. And so that was pretty huge for me. Mm-hmm. So I got baptized a couple months after, and then COVID happened because that was 2019. Oh, sorry. I got my dates mixed up. 2019 going into 20. Yeah. That's when I got saved. Yeah. So 2019 going into 2020.
Terrible timing for a pandemic.
Yes.
Not that there's any good timing for a pandemic, but especially in your case.
I was like, okay. So, so right after, I would say 2 months or so. Yeah. 2 months after I got baptized, COVID happened. Boom.
Wow.
And so I was trying to find a church to go to. I didn't know anywhere to go. Mm-hmm. I had gone to one place that a family friend had recommended, but they had closed maybe after the second or third time I had gone because they were meeting on a college campus and the COVID
the campus shut down,
closed. So for 10 months, my just space there was, I don't know where to go. I don't know any other Christians. Mm-hmm. My husband at the time, we got married in July of that year. And so he was exploring his faith too, because we were dating before and we're both not Christians.
Right.
So that was also a big part of the story, me coming to faith and him coming to faith, and then us getting married shortly after. But
that's awesome.
We're without a church for, I would say, like a solid 9-10 months or so.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's tough in the first place. But I mean, to be a new Christian and not have a community to fall back on, that's got to be really tough.
Yeah. So that was rough. But it shaped us. And I feel like as I grow, I can see how much that season makes sense. Mm-hmm. So
that's cool.
Kind of like a mystery that continues to unfold because why I'm going through this or what value is going to come of it. But yeah, 2020 was a trip for sure. But yeah, and so to answer the last part of your question about how the faith and music intersected, it was really hard. I was very, I was quite used to talking about my feelings, my perspective,
Mm-hmm.
talking about what I wanted to talk about, how I wanted to talk about it. I used music as escape a lot. I was performing under a different name too, for clarity. So me even going playing. So I think that was the big change. I didn't know how to sing about God or sing for any other interest than my own.
Right.
It was like,
Yeah.
how to do this, it used to be my voice, my gift, my thought, my plan.
Yeah.
And that
And it's
all
like once you build the foundation on that, it's hard to kind of, you have
rip it
to
out.
break
Yeah,
it down to build it back up. And you're like, I don't really know if I want to do that. That sounds like a lot of work.
100%. So I felt like a kid, like learning how to ride a bike again, for sure.
Oh, wow.
I remember trying to sing, even just saying the word God was uncomfortable. And
Really?
I felt how awkward I sounded when I said it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
So, it was definitely a learning process. So it was practice and growing in my relationship with him. But I knew what he put in me for sure was worshiping him, and how
Right.
all music is worship, and how I needed to have a transformed heart to do this type of music that he was calling me to do. And I had to learn from square one what that was. So
Yeah.
that was a big part for me, because when I got saved, one of my first questions, after my whole life is just changing, I'm like, okay, but what do I do about the music? Do I not sing
Right.
anymore? I had learned so much I lived in Korea in 2017, and I learned so much about music there. And I didn't know what to do with all these experiences that I had cherished, and all of these people that I had met, and all of the music.
Yeah.
I said, do I just sing in church now? I don't know. I've never listened to gospel or anything like that before.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like almost like culture shock as well, I think.
Yeah.
Because I had to reorient. God had to reorient everything for me to approach it differently. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That sounds like a lot, but honestly, like, I mean, coming on the other side of it and having listened to your music, I'm so glad that you didn't just you'd be like, all right, well, I guess I got to be done with this. But it's like, you kind of, I mean, I'm sure we're probably get to talk about it a little bit more as we go on, but it's like God gave you a gift and a talent and a passion to do something. And I think sometimes there are passions and talents and gifts and whatever that, that we have, that God's like, okay, are you willing to give this up for me?
Yeah.
But I think there are also, the Bible says God places desires in our heart. And so it's just a matter of, okay, how do we take that and actually take our naturally sinful mind and approach, whether it's overtly sinful or if it's even just like you were saying, like pride and isolation and independence and all that stuff. Like, how do I take this and strip away my thoughts and replace them with God's thoughts so I can actually use this to glorify the Lord? And I'm really glad that you did that, because we wouldn't have your music otherwise. And you've got a lot to give. And I think it's really cool. It's so glad that you did that.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And I know I kind of teased it at the beginning, right? You've dropped an EP, like that's huge. 2024, it just in general seems to be shaping up to be a pretty big year for you. So obviously you don't have to reveal anything that's super under wraps if you don't want, but if there's anything that you're wanting to kind of share with our audience? Like, what have you been up to on the creative front recently?
No, thanks for the question.
Yeah.
I think so a lot of things I'm excited for this year. One is to release more music throughout May and to just get a consistent flow going. I think a lot of the years that I've spent since 2020 has been wrestling with God and how he's wanted me to approach music and hold it, because I held it as such an idol for so long. I think there was a lot of spiritual growth and maturity that I had to undergo before I felt prepared to be releasing music in a regular way. So that's a big win for this year. And I think I'm really excited. I'm working on a music video for the first time since
that's awesome.
Releasing music under my name, Ravahn. So that's been a beautiful process so far. So our shooting days I think will fall within the summer.
That's awesome.
And I think the biggest thing that has like the locked in date is a show that I have June 29th at this venue in Manhattan. So I'll be in the city. Heaven Can Wait. And so, yeah, I think I'm really excited. I'm doing that show with a friend, JJ, who runs like events or shows for artists who are Christian in the city, which is such a fight and such a beautiful that he's decided to take on. So his thing is called Unite, and we'll be doing a show together in June. So it'll be me and Sarah Jewers, who's also lives out here, and then another artist named Doina, who's out here as well. So I'm really looking forward to that show.
Awesome.
Just worship I love seeing worship in the city here. So
yeah, that's incredible. Mm-hmm. That's super cool. And I love what you were saying too, of like, just the allowing God to do the work in you first, to really prepare you for the platform. It's almost like, if you think about it in terms of maybe a performance, right, where it's like you got front stage, backstage, it's like God really preparing you backstage
100%
for these moments for you to be front stage of, releasing music like the EP and working through a music video and performing, and especially in a place where, I mean, like you said earlier, like New York City's kind of going through it. Like there's people there that need the hope of the Lord. And it's like, for you to be prepared for like such a time as this, is pretty powerful. So, I'm excited for that. And dang, I gotta find a way to make my way to New York in June. That's crazy.
Come on.
I know. I feel like I'm almost close to maxing out on PTO, and we're not even halfway through the year yet. But if I can make a way to make it happen, I'm there, girl. 100%.
More than welcome.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I'm super stoked for all the things you've got going on. And I definitely want to even dive into maybe some of the things that you've learned in that maturation process, that the Lord has revealed to you in your journey, just getting to where you are. And I think there's a lot that our listeners can learn from you as well. I know for me, one thing that I've experienced in my creative journey is just how much I learn about like myself and the Lord and the way he sees me and how he uses my creative giftings and my creative drivers to really draw me closer to him and draw me closer to his heart. And so, I don't know if that's been the case for you, but if it has, like, what's one of the biggest things that God has revealed to you about his character, just as you've been in the process of writing and recording music?
100%. God he's always just blowing whatever my expectation or understanding or something is, just off the top. I think the biggest thing, because I think as I was writing this project, this last EP, there's an unraveling that happens, and there's this dance between vulnerability and grace and mercy and honesty and responsibility. There's just so many things of when you're
right
trying to decide what words to share and how to share them, what emotions to share. And I think one of the first things that God was teaching me was his grace. And I don't think I'm alone on this. For me, I can lean perfectionist. And I think, of course, that comes from a type of pride, which is my forte. I know about that one, you know? So I said, oh, I know her. We've been friends for a while. So, you know, when I feel some of the very frustrated ways that I used to make music from a really dark place, honestly. And you wouldn't know. I was good at masking. Before I was Christian, I was releasing music. I had a lot of undealt with sadness or anger and resentment. And because music was my escape, I wasn't really dealing with it or bringing other people into that fold. I was more so just cryptically putting things in my music that would bring me comfort it was very self-soothing in that way.
Yeah.
And I think now with God, I feel one of the things he's teaching me is that process, the way you used to write, we don't do that anymore. You don't write music or release music to receive love and validation from other people anymore. Now, for the first time in your life, you're going to make music knowing you're loved already, knowing that there's nothing that can validate you, but know it truly, not fake know it, because you can know it in your head. Like that has to be in your heart. And I think that's what that tumbling was for me. I had to learn, and I'm still learning. It doesn't really end. But I had to learn that I have this freedom. And I think that's the other thing, grace into freedom, that this freedom I have in Christ, I feel really blessed because he's always showing me you're actually less restricted than you think. You're actually less restricted than you think. And it just continues. So I think when I'm frustrated and I'm recording a take and it's not going the way that I want, or I don't know why, like this project was a challenge because I recorded it and produced it and engineered it at home, which I had never this degree before. So it was a very big challenge for me to just take a swing at it and just try my best to implement what I've learned so far. And just the frustrations. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
like just learning something new or thinking you knew something and then finding out that you're not, and just realizing how much of a helpless child you are and how much we need God to guide us. So I think his character definitely showed up in saying, the way you get frustrated, Ravahn, with when you make a mistake, I don't really get that frustrated. Like that's you, I have more grace for you. There are new mercies every day. You don't need to carry whatever that is. And I think when we super hyper focus on something as artists, it can feel like this impossible mountain to scale or this impossible, obstacle that we can never get around. And I think God's showing me that, first of all, none of this is bigger than me. Some of this stuff does not matter as much as you think it is, and there's grace for you. And I think that allowed me to be more free, because that also deals with the fear of making mistakes, or the fear of being viewed as incompetent, or whatever my heart is garnering up in that moment. And so I think that sort of comfort for me was huge. God showing me how his grace is really, it doesn't really have, like, oh, I've run out of grace today. No, it's continuous. And the freedom that he allows is actually much greater than the freedom that I try to give myself.
That's so good. I even think about just the lies that I feel like pop culture pushes.
Oh my God. Talk about it.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like when it's like we're kind of in this environment, in this society where it's like, if you're not believing that you're enough and that you you have to love yourself before you can love others, and like stuff like that, like it's like all of these feel good kind of fortune cookie messages where it's like on the surface, you're like, that sounds positive, that sounds good, and honestly sometimes even sounds biblical. But then there's a lot of trapping in that. I think you're highlighting that, of like, you set the standard for yourself. You're like, but what if I can't love myself? And what if I'm not enough?
Right.
which the Bible says that
We're not.
we're not. So that's
The whole
kind of,
thing.
it sets an impossible standard for yourself, you know,
Yeah.
and I think that you're really highlighting that. You know, because he's like, I want to be enough for you, but I can't be enough for you if you're so focused on trying to be enough on your own.
Yeah.
You know, and so I love that you're
Yes.
highlighting that, like,
Mhm.
in your work, because it's like, man, like how much I think you highlight the word that you're using is freedom, and I think that's so key, because it's like
Mhm.
sometimes it's like the Jesus like opens the door to the cage for us, and we're just like, okay, thank you for opening the door, but then we don't leave the cage.
Yeah.
We just keep ourselves caged at that point, and that's rough.
Yeah.
So I love that you're highlighting that, just even in the process of like allowing God to be the perfect one, allowing God to be the one that's enough, and like just being really confident in, this is the identity that I have because Christ covers me, not
Yeah.
because I got it all on my own,
Yes.
you know? So,
Everything is, it reminds me, I love so much what you said too. Thank you for sharing the point about not enoughness, because I think that that can get thrown around, and I'm thinking of Ezekiel when he has to eat the
mm,
scroll. Like, you got to eat that. Like, you have to
yeah.
stand that in your guts that you are a recipient of a gift. And it
Mm-hmm.
reminds me, there are two things that came to mind when you said that. And I think about humility and what it actually means, which is a big chapter for me in terms of not just God healing me from all the wounds of pride, but also the misunderstandings of what humility is, even within the church. And then going to what is the biblical understanding of living with humility, or showing others love, and humility being a practice of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that um, something that is really beautiful, I'm thinking about when Paul, I think it's First Corinthians, I'm not sure if it's first or second, but he's talking about the different apostles, and he's saying, what is there to boast about? What makes you so
Mm,
different? Everything you have, you've received it. Why do you boast
right.
of your own works? And I'm just like, oh, chill,
Don't call me out like that.
easy, So I think it's such a beautiful thing, because one of the beautiful lessons I had this year is just the degree to which everything is a gift. And that's something I'll
Yeah.
continue to learn. But really, our voices, our talents, us waking up, us even having whatever measure of grace we have for certain things, every single thing is a gift. Nothing is earned. And I think that is one of the biggest lies I think pop culture can insinuate, or can push. And I definitely was
Yeah.
a believer of that for a long time. Of, if you can do better, then you're going to do better. Mind over matter. Like, if you just work hard enough, you'll achieve
Right.
better. Like, all of that stuff. And I think that ties into humility. And this is one of the, I think, biggest chapters of my walk right now. And it's a book called You're Only Human, by Kelly. I'm forgetting his last name. And, but it's really been a blessing to me, because I think where I am right now is, how do you say, I love my limitations?
Mm,
What? That
that's
is
good.
crazy. Who wants to say that? Like, he was highlighting in the garden how, that's part of the serpent's temptation. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, how can you be more godlike? How can you reject the finite design that God has given you, and
Yeah.
be infinite on your own terms? And that's just we're a lot of ways that we practice that today. And I practice that, and, kind of making your own eternities in your whatever capacity you can. but I never, he says it plain in his book. He's talking about how, you know, you can treat your limitations as if they are bad things that you need to stomp out, essentially. I'm paraphrasing, but what if we embrace them as
Yeah.
in God's intended limitations that are for our good? And that is a mind shift for me, for sure. I usually tend to reject limitations and be frustrated by them and try to conquer them. And I think that's been a beautiful lesson in humility, being able to appreciate my limitations, honor those who have gifts that I don't, and just see God's, the different pieces of God's story expressed through different people and the different, talents and calls that he's given to his kingdom, people in his kingdom. So
that's so good. I love that last bit too, where it's like, it's really removing yourself from the role of main character in your life, where it's like, I might not be the person to take something from point A to point B, and that's okay. Like, God's gifted somebody else, and I should just be grateful that it was taken from point A to point B, whatever that looks like. It's like, in, having worked in the church world in the past, like, I'm like, okay, I might not be the person that takes this person from non-believer to surrender to Christ.
Right.
But I should still celebrate that happened.
Yeah.
I don't have to be the main character, or, I think in the creative field, it's like, maybe I didn't create a work that drew somebody into an emotional encounter with the living God.
Right.
But somebody else might have done that.
Right.
And let's celebrate that. So I think that is really key, because I think it's so easy to be like inward and just thinking inward, even if maybe our focus or our goal might be something that we think is good or beautiful or holy, which I think on the outset it might be, and our heart posture just might not be what's clicking with that. But yeah, I think, I just love the way that you put that, where it's like, okay, I'm not the main character. They're not the main character. The Lord is the main character. So let's celebrate the wins together as a family, because one day we're going to get to heaven and our gifts aren't going to come with us. And what we did here on this earth isn't going to come with us. Like, the only thing we're going to see in heaven are souls. And we just, that's our role, is being part of the crowd, worshiping the main character. So, I love the way that you put that, of I think even as a creative community, but I think even as a broader community of Christians, like, let's rally around each other and celebrate each other's wins.
Yeah.
And not be so inward focused, you know?
100%.
So
100%.
That's good. And then I think on the flip side too, just to kind of even, I think, transition into another question, right? We're talking a lot about us and how maybe we're not the main character, but on the flip side, like, God's character is something that to me is so vast and so awe-inspiring that I know personally, sometimes it can be difficult to even know where to start when I'm trying to create something that highlights who he is to me personally. I'm like, dang, this is a task. So I guess for you, like, what is it like to put your relationship with the Lord, like, for you, to song and verse? Like, would you say that's like kind of more intimidating to try and capture all of that and put it together? Or is that something that comes pretty naturally to you?
I think at first, I think it's changed over time. I think at first, actually, this is interesting. I think it's interesting.
I'm sure I'll think it's interesting too.
It may not be interesting. I think, so when I first started trying to write, music that worship the Lord and things like that, I felt like I was very utilitarian in a way. I was saying, how can I effectively communicate theology and make it clear and da-da-da and da-da-da.
Right.
So it was beauty was there for sure, because I think it was it's just kind of natural in just, sounds you like and things like that.
Right.
Not to say it was just like reading a manual, but I think because of where I was in my walk, it was a mark of a space where I hadn't grown yet, or was still growing. Obviously, that continues all the way.
Right.
But I think for me, I was thinking about, how do I get this message out about God and putting it in this way? So what
almost
I
overthinking
did,
it.
Sorry?
You're almost like you're overthinking it is kind of what
like,
I'm
it's
hearing.
almost like I'm treating it like a dissertation, not a piece of art.
Which
and I guess a dissertation is definitely something that takes prayer and reading the word and discerning and living it.
Good.
And I think in the beginning, that was more so like, I'm going to help people know the Lord through my music, which obviously great. You're glorifying God. I think as I kept wrestling with that over the years, there was a part of me too that was like, but I want to also pull on the things that have impacted me in this world. Like I'm very influenced by, a lot of the artists I had met when I was living in Korea and my experiences there, and coming back to New York and experimenting with, pop or electronic, etc. What about that part of my reality? That surely can't mean nothing anymore. Right. And so I think where God has led me and is continuing to lead me is that dance between, how do I share my humanity that God gave me, and also honor him in a way that doesn't feel like I'm trying to be something or that I'm trying to say something, but in a way that reflects who I am. And I think doing that dance takes practice, because it's a bit nuanced, because, I can listen to a song that glorifies God, but then not know anything about the singer. It feels so distant. So like the words are almost so impersonal. They're like keywords that it says there isn't something where I can tell you a characteristic of the human behind the song, which is fine. Like sometimes there's songs where you're just like, you want to talk about God and that's it. That's the assignment.
Right.
Cool. But I think I've been really interested in seeing how can I connect with people that I love, who I may not know, who may love the Lord, who may not, and show them my humanity, but also still show them my love for God, not because I'm trying to be someone who's like that, but that's because that's who I am. And I think for me, I'm sure you've heard so many conversations about Christian music as a genre. What is worship? I know, Bailey, you've heard these conversations.
I have.
But I think where I am is that because I believe, and this is where I am right now, and I like to say that because then you can't say I'm not down to change. This is where I am.
I love that. I love that.
Where I am right now, that I feel like music is just worship. It's not reserved for specific people. I think it's in all of us. And I think that who you are should show through the music that comes out of you. Yeah. So if you love the Lord, 1 + 1 = that's so it doesn't even have to be a genre. And so, I've had those questions like, oh God, am I a Christian singer now? What does that mean? And I think where I am right now is like, no, I'm just a singer and I sing about who I love. And if it was something else that I loved, I would sing about that. But this is where I am now,
That's so good.
Yeah.
I love that. No, I mean, I think you bring up a really good point of music is just worship. And I think even just to kind of widen it to the broader perspective of, I think creativity
Mm-hmm.
is worship. I think
Yes.
doing what you were created to do is worship, which means, I think about, for example, my family, my little brother, he's studying actuarial science in college right
What,
now, which
what
is literally just that's exactly what I said. He's studying, it's like the statistics behind, or no, probability. I don't even really know. I think it's like probability when it comes to like insurance. I'll look it up and I'll get back to you.
I'm gonna be an actuary.
But anyway, long story short, he is
Sounds
a very
like
exactly, he very mathematically minded,
mm-hmm.
like black and white, scientific, logical kind of dude.
Right.
I got the complete opposite side of the brain when it came
Right.
to like, I think we cover a wide variety
Right.
in my household growing up, but I don't have a single bone in my body that can do that. But I lean very heavily creative, very
Wow.
heavily abstract,
Yeah.
and I'm like, when I'm like, God designed me to do something very, very different than what he designed me to do, what he designed my brother to do.
Right.
But when it comes down to it, it's like when my brother is using his gifts to serve the people around him
Yes.
and run after the plan that God has for his life, like that's worship, just in the same way as me using my creativity to honor the Lord, because that's what God imprinted me with, and it's like, ultimately it's just, we're image bearers. And if we're bearing the image and reflecting Jesus, and no matter what we do, then that's worship. And so I love that you kind of had, you mentioned that, because it's so true. It doesn't have to have a certain look or sound or, whatever to be worship. And that's why I kind of like that, even when we talk about like the genre of worship music, it's like, when you actually look at the technical genre, if you go on Spotify, it's like contemporary Christian music, or it's gospel, or, there's even subgenres within that. But it's like, I think you're so right. All music is worship. It's just, what are you worshiping?
Right.
Are you worshiping yourself? A lot of artists are doing that these days.
Right.
But if you're worshiping the King of Kings, it's going to show through your lyrics. It's going to show through your work. And I think that when you're talking about, do I know the person behind this work of art? That's key, right? Like, I think it's discovering. It's just like the same thing as hearing a testimony.
Right.
As you get to hear the impact that the Lord has made on somebody else's life, and there's a chance that could change them.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be, I'm singing the Psalms,
Right. Right.
And it could be, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think there's more to it than that. We don't have to pigeonhole it.
Right.
So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're coming close on time. I did have one more question for you. And that was kind of more so just even on pursuing your craft intentionally, I guess, is maybe the case. Because I think it's one thing to be a casual hobbyist artist, which that's great. And if you land in that category as a listener right now, just know we love you and you're welcome here, and there's a space for you here. But I also want to even talk to the people where it's like, it's another thing to just completely invest your time and resources into pursuing your craft. And so for artists that maybe are looking to do the latter, what would your advice or encouragement be for them to just continue to invest in and pursue that craft?
Okay, I want to honor this question because I really feel like there's so much information out there. I feel like we're definitely in an age of noise where you can read a million things and then still not really have an answer. So I really hope, I pray God helps me to give a really helpful answer to who's ever listening. That's my hope. First, I would say, as advice, to pursue it intentionally as a career or, professionally, from my experience. I think one is remembering that you're a disciple first. And I'm super passionate about that. And I get it'd be like, oh, that's not really an answer. Hold on. I am getting there. But I feel like that's just the first part, because I think music and all of its friends is if you're pursuing it as something that you want to dedicate your time and money into, it's a very, very crucial thing to make sure that's what God wants you to be doing.
It's good.
That is key. The frustrations of pursuing something that God did not call you to pursue in that way, there's no answer for that to fix that. It would be to just stop or prioritize it appropriately in the way that God's calling you to do. So I think that's the key thing to remember, that we're disciples first. We're not artists first. It starts with our relationship with God. And so that's prayer, that's reading your Bible, that's attending, your church and loving your community and being loved on by people in your community, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that is crucial. I know for me, I had such an idolatry of music and success in music and all those things before I was a Christian. So I think that was one of the key things. That was a stark contrast for me.
For sure.
Gotta be right with God. And then the second thing I would say is learn your business, like learn your stuff. So if you are intending to pursue it seriously, that's what God wants you to do. Obviously you're praying, so he's going to guide you through stuff. One of the things that he's blessed me with knowing is study your craft and learn the business of it as well. Because of course, if it's going to be something that you're doing for your livelihood, that's an element of it that you're going to have to learn. And I think a lot of times when I've come across stuff that I've read, because I'm pursuing this as independent, this was my year to give it like a good go. So I'm speaking from me being in it right now and me learning things and me investing my own personal, like my own time into it. So I'm sharing that transparently because I think a lot of times too, with pop culture or music culture, people can gatekeep certain information or present themselves as more successful as they are, as a way to garner some sort of acclaim for themselves. I'm not interested in that. Learn your stuff, be informed, so that when that moment does come, you're not going to be taken advantage of. So if you're an artist, learn about what publishing is, what royalties are, what licensing opportunities you'll have, what your local venues are. Link up with other artists, whether that's sending them an email or going to shows. Serve, that's huge. Be down to do things for free. Not saying that that's what you should do all the time. Like, I know there's the shady, but for exposure. But sometimes the gift is just being able to worship the Lord, and God can use your humility and that opportunity to bless someone. And again, the opportunity is going to come from the Lord anyways. It's not going to come from you earning it. So know that you have that freedom to do things out of generosity, which is kind of like the point.
Yeah.
And so I think also whatever space, so I'm thinking of Matthew 22, 37, 40. We have the 2 commandments of loving the Lord and then loving with all our heart, soul, and mind, and loving our neighbor as ourselves. So I think out of loving your neighbor, it's of value to, it's really important to bring value to the spaces that you're entering, which is why it's important to learn. If you want to bring value to the people around you, it helps for you to be informed about certain things. And so I think having that posture of how can I love people in this space, you get an opportunity, you can share what you've learned with somebody else, or maybe you get an opportunity to perform somewhere, you can offer a slot to someone else to perform and share the stage. You're able to offer value because you're learning how things work. And then you can pass that info on to someone else who may be starting anew. So those are some things that come to mind.
That was great. I think what I really appreciate about your answer, kind of as a collective whole, because I have a lot of thoughts on all the individual things that you said, but I feel like I could probably stretch it out for forever. But I think what's really helpful is you addressed the spiritual, and you also address the practical because you got to have both. But I love that you led with the spiritual.
Yeah.
Because that really is so key is, you know, aligning yourself with the will of God, and not trying to align God with your will.
Yep.
I think is so important. And then once you have got that down, that's your foundation. But just because you have a foundation doesn't mean you don't have to build.
Right.
It's like, you know, it's still putting in the work and not expecting God to just hand it over to you just because that's his will for your life. But actually really running the race that he's called you to race. That includes running, you know? So
yeah. There's a practice that we're gifted to try.
Absolutely. And the piece about, I think about I think that's kind of been a theme throughout this whole conversation, but just the humility in serving others.
Yeah.
Like having it really be the focus is
right.
The people around you and the Lord.
Yeah.
And I think from there, it's like once your eyes are off yourself, the pressure kind of comes off yourself too. So I just love that you mentioned that. So yeah, all in all, I usually I'm like, let's back and forth. Let's talk about that. I'm like, what? I don't even think I could really add anything to that. That was so good. That had so much value. So thank you for that. Well, I know, like I said, we're running lower on time, but was there anything that, you know, is on your heart that you're like, man, I really want to share this with our audience and it just hasn't come up in conversation? Or if not, that's fine. But I always want to give you the floor.
I just think an encouragement. If you're an artist and you're really out here trying to figure all this stuff out, you know, I just encourage you, just know that, you know, wherever you are, I'm here too, rooting for you, trying the same in New York. And I think it's a really beautiful thing. It's a really powerful call that God has. And I think in that, there's that challenge. But yeah, just an encouragement for anyone who's maybe felt like they're not good enough, they're not prepared enough, they're not whatever, insert the reason to not try is. Just an encouragement to bring that to the Lord and allow him to sustain you in that. Because I do think like the beauty of God as his attribute is just so important, and he's so kind to put that in us in all our different ways. Beauty in your brother and his number crunching, and the beauty in you and you killing it with the podcast and all the other creative endeavors that you have. And I think it's in all of us. And I think it's a sad thing when it gets stamped out because someone may feel discouraged or like they're not, you know, up to par to whatever standards. So just an encouragement that, you know, if God's called you, like that's the only validation that's matters, and that's the only one that's going to stick. So
that's so good.
Keep going.
That's so good. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for jumping on the show today, Ravahn. And like this, I mean it seriously when I say this conversation has been such a blessing to me.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm sure it's going to bring encouragement to somebody listening to this right now. And I'm just really excited for everything that the Lord has ahead of you. You know, I think your desire to pursue him, no matter what that looks like, whether it's through music or whether it's through something else, like it's so evident and it's so apparent. And so I think that I'm just really excited to just continue to hear stories about how, as you pursue the Lord, it changes the people around you. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to connect today.
Thank you. Me too. And to you too. Like, thank you for your podcast, for the Creative Christian podcast. Thank you for opening that space. It's so necessary. It's so needed. I'm encouraged that you are, you know, where you're at in Arizona doing the thing. And yeah, I just want to encourage you too, because it's so crucial to have voices like you that are encouraging these conversations and, you know, participating in that space. So thank you for what you're doing too, Bailey. It's really crucial. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you for saying that. I love the creative community, and I love that we serve a creative God. Like how blessed are we that that's something that he cares about, you know? So
Yeah.
I'm stoked for that. I'm stoked for you. It's going to be awesome. For the listeners, go ahead and check out Ravahnn's music if you haven't yet. Like I said, her EP, it released in March, so you can go ahead and binge the whole thing right now if you want to. She's got a music video coming in the summer. And if you're in the New York area, you got to go check out that show, y'all. So yeah, go ahead, connect with Ravahn. I'll put all the links in the show notes. And as always, if you're encouraged by this podcast, please feel free to rate and review the show. It is the #1 way to get our content out in front of other creatives just like you and provide them with some encouragement as well. And can't wait to catch you guys next time. It will actually be our first ever repeat guest on the show. I'm not going to tell y'all who it is. You'll have to tune in 2 weeks, but I'm excited to see y'all then. And until then, keep creating.